Okay. Good afternoon. We're going to get started right here on time. Thank you for being here. On behalf of VCUarts Qatar Libraries and Dr. Amy Andres, Director of Libraries, and our Associate University Librarian, welcome everyone to this very important discussion on generative AI in teaching and learning in higher education. My name is Dr. Jacqulyn Williams, and I am Head of Teaching, Learning, and Strategic Initiatives and Associate Professor here at VCUarts Qatar. Joining me today to moderate this panel is Ms. Nicole Abiad, Writing Center Coordinator, also of VCUarts Qatar. As we all know, generative AI, including tools like ChatGPT, has already begun to change how we think about teaching, how students engage with content, and how we assess learning. It challenges us to rethink the very nature of learning, how we help students develop critical thinking, creativity, and adaptability in a world where AI is increasingly intertwined with human work and decision-making. Our objective today is to discuss key questions that are fundamental to the future of higher education. How do we design courses that integrate AI without losing focus on our mission to foster independent thinkers that have intellectual curiosity as well as integrity? What are the ethical implications of using AI in our classrooms? And how do we ensure it enhances rather than diminishes our work as educators? And finally, how do we prepare students not just to use AI, but to understand its broader social implications and engage with it responsibly? We have a distinguished panel of experts here today to help guide us through these complex questions. But first, I'd like to introduce Mr. Amir Berbić, Dean of VCUarts Qatar, who will start and offer his remarks.
Good afternoon. What a crowd. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. And it's a real pleasure to see so many colleagues from across Education City. Thank you all. It's a real pleasure. I want to start by stating that ChatGPT or GTP was not used in the preparation of these remarks. These remarks are a product of collaboration between myself and the wonderful real human beings who work in the communications department at VCUQ and often help draft my speeches. It is my distinct pleasure as Dean of VCUQ to welcome you to today's Education City-wide faculty panel discussion on generative AI in teaching and learning. Thank you to VCUarts Qatar Libraries for spearheading today's event. We have wonderful real human beings in the library as well. And special thanks to the organizers and moderators, Dr. Jacqulyn Williams, Head of Teaching, Learning, and Strategic Initiatives, and Nicole Abiad, VCUarts Qatar's Writing Center Coordinator, for their time and energy in bringing this exceptional panel together. I'm pleased to see that the panelists sharing their wisdom and experience today are from a cross-section of Education City partner universities, making this a truly multiversity experience. And of course, we're going to enjoy the content and the discussion in the panel, but it was also just very nice to have a multiversity experience during the lunch and coffee hour just moments ago. My thanks also to our partners at the Qatar Foundation for their support. I know that representatives from the QF Higher Education Division are with us this afternoon. Artificial intelligence has rapidly evolved from a futuristic concept into a tool and an environment that is undoubtedly changing our educational practices. From personalized learning experiences and intelligent tutoring to automated grading and data-driven insights, not to mention new ways of unlocking creative expression. AI has the potential to enhance every aspect of teaching and learning. As we navigate these advancements, we are presented with incredible opportunities to tailor education to individual needs and foster more engaging and effective learning environments. But as we know, we are also presented with challenges and critical questions related to academic integrity, possible erosion in critical thinking, de-skilling, various ethical questions, questions of bias, and others, which our panelists will likely touch on. Leading up to today's event, I've had interesting conversations with Jacqulyn and Nicole on how the discourse on AI and its impact on pedagogy has shifted quickly from a reactive and punitive attitude towards one that is much more responsive and proactive. It is clear that the integration of AI in education is not just a trend. It is a transformative force that is refining how we teach, learn, and interact with our academic environments. And schools, universities, academic programs, with its curricular frameworks and existing pedagogical practices, must evolve, find ways to integrate AI in meaningful and responsible ways in order to remain relevant. Of course, many academic institutions around the world are in the midst of the same conversations and are looking for ways to respond to a quickly shifting world. We have seen our own home campus in Richmond, Virginia, for example, already introduce new courses, areas of studies, minors and concentrations focused on AI and ethics, practical AI, and related areas. And we see certainly many universities do the same. Today, we will delve into a range of topics from the pedagogical applications of AI in the classroom, ethical considerations, institutional policies, and future possibilities and best practices. Our panelists bring considerable knowledge and diverse perspectives on this subject. And even in the short time that we have been discussing AI in the sphere of education, they've made great strides already in deepening their expertise in this area. And I want to thank them for being here today to share this expertise. As we engage with our distinguished panelists today, I encourage us all to think critically on how these innovations can be implemented in our teaching practices, as well as the challenges and ethical considerations that come with them. Thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the discussion. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Samah Gamar, Director of Academic Affairs at Qatar Foundation's Higher Education Division, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Berbić, and thank you very much, Dr. Jacqulyn, for inviting the Higher Education Division to provide just a few words of welcome. It's obvious by the turnout that artificial intelligence is so yesterday's news, just by the turnout here. I think that many of us are looking around for any opportunity to discuss artificial intelligence and its implications, especially as it relates to teaching and learning. On behalf of the Higher Education Division at Qatar Foundation, welcome to this event, an initiative that truly exemplifies the very ethos of the QF multiversity framework. Many of us understand the concept of multiversity as one of the world's most unique higher education models that operates at Education City like no other. 8 universities, each with its distinct institutional culture and signature programs, renowned globally for its academic delivery and research. And yet, why just have one university of excellence when you can have so much more? One university demonstrating excellence when we can actually have 8 collectively reimagine, converge, capitalize, leverage, and accelerate together, building on their strengths. Multiversity is enabled by a number of key pillars and key people, many of whom are here in this room to actualize this vision of multiple universities working together, Dean Berbić, Dr. Jacqulyn, and other respected colleagues. Multiversity's pillars include collaboration and integration, leveraging strengths on multiple universities to create interdisciplinary programs. The menu of accessible courses and majors and minors triple, quadruple in this thriving system here at Qatar Foundation and Education City. The amplification of impact, striving for outcomes that well exceed what one university can accomplish in a way that extends beyond the campus and reverberates across the entire ecosystem. Consistency and complementarity, celebrating quality and complementary programs that work across the campuses. Innovative, stakeholder-centered programming, building programs in a more dynamic, nimble, and adaptive way so that our students have multiple options to pursue their dreams and their lifelong learning pathways. Community belonging and civic engagement, fostering here at Education City a sense of community belonging, and what a thriving system it is when students feel that they are truly part of a city that is thriving with various centers and recreation facilities and various functionalities. Multiversity facilitates this integration and allows for this enhanced fluidity. Beyond the ability for students to take courses across campuses, we're well aware of cross-registration and majors and minors. Multiversity enables students to earn a distinctive QF Excellence Award. Many of you are familiar that Qatar Foundation facilitates an Excellence Award where students can demonstrate their multiple ways of impacting the community. Beyond Excellence Awards, students will soon be invited to participate in an Education City-wide co-curricular transcript that aims to leverage artificial intelligence to help students envision and be able to celebrate and visualize and also demonstrate their experiential and applied learning skills by being able to demonstrate their experiential and applied skills earned and gained within Education City and beyond. These initiatives would only be possible by a spirit of unsatiated ambition, a restlessness to push beyond traditional, institutional, and even self-imposed boundaries. Those of us who teach writing would say silencing the critic in us during the free writing process. And so I feel that Education City and the potential that is here is really part of that, silencing the critical. Why can't we achieve it? Why can't we push beyond the boundaries? An exciting panel from across Education City is convened here, and you're all here to listen to them talk about the possibilities of generative AI. And these discussions, no doubt, will yield further innovations in this teeming ecosystem. I will not be one to keep you away from benefiting from our panelists, except to say that we have an opportunity in this discussion to contextualize our discussions on the implications of digital tools as a manifestation of human potential, the human spirit, and also to think about, from a local perspective, the epistemological, socio-political, and egalitarian and social justice implications of information access, curation, and dissemination, especially in locales where indigenous knowledge and epistemology have been relegated to the margins. I will also have a disclaimer to say that no words that I just shared were generated by AI. And I think the fact that Dean Berbić and I emphasize that is kind of coming back to the importance of ingenuity, the importance of the human spirit. These tools can absolutely assist us, but nothing can replace that human spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gamar, for your very thoughtful comments. I think we are all in agreement in terms of our support and dedication to multiversity initiatives. Case in point, today's panel. Thank you again for those thoughtful remarks. Now, Ms. Nour Tarroun, an art history junior and the lead peer research consultant in the Art and Design Library, will introduce the panelists.
Good afternoon. It is my distinct pleasure to be introducing today's panelists in today's discussion. I'll be starting with Rawan AlSaad, is a postdoctoral associate at the AI Center for Precision Health, Weill Cornell Medicine, Qatar. With 15 years of experience in academia, she has developed expertise as an AI health specialist, AI educator, and AI strategist. At Weill, Dr. AlSaad leads research projects focused on AI applications in women's health, teaches pre-medical students, and develops accredited AI healthcare courses for healthcare professionals. She holds a PhD in computer science with a specialization in artificial intelligence in Qatar University. Chadi Aoun is area head for the Information Systems Program and a teaching professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar. He holds a PhD in Information Systems from the University of New South Wales. He, along with the academic qualifications in education, business, law, and environmental science. He is the recipient of multiple teaching awards, including CMUQ Meritorious Teaching Awards, Professor Aoun is a member of the Australian Computer Society and the Association for Information Systems, where he served as president of SIG Green. Jörg Matthias Determann is a professor in the Department of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar. He also serves as associate editor for the Review of Middle East Studies and as book review editor of the journal Arabian Studies. He holds a doctorate from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, and 2 master's degrees from the University of Vienna. He's the author of 5 books, including Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in Astronomy, A Modern History. Sam Meekings, an associate professor of creative writings at Northwestern University, and an international renowned poet and novelist. Meekings is the author of Under Fishbone Clouds, The Book of Crows, and The Afterlife of Dr. Gachet. His writings has been featured on the BCC, in The Independent, on the Arena on Radio 1, and in National Geographic. His latest academic book is The Scholarship of Creative Writing Practice. Jamie Olsen is currently the Associate Director for Pedagogy and Innovation and teaches philosophy at Georgetown University in Qatar. He has an MA in International Affairs from George Washington University and a PhD in philosophy from Georgetown University. Prior to being dominated by questions of AI, his primary focus in recent years has been environmental philosophy, as well as course design, inclusive pedagogy, and issues in teaching sustainability. Mary Queen, formerly a faculty member in the Division of Arts and Sciences and director of the Writing Center at CMUQ, is a visiting associate teaching professor of English at CMUQ. She primarily teaches first-year writing courses in which she explores with her students the impact of various technologies on the rhetorical choices that writers and readers make. With the advent of ChatGPT, she committed to co-learning with her students how Gen AI transforms ideas and rhetorical questions. Jessie Payne holds a MFA and is an associate professor at VCUarts Qatar, where he leads the drawing pillar in the Art Foundation department. His work focuses on combining traditional art practices with innovative technologies, including AI. Jessie developed VCUarts Qatar's first course on integrating AI tools such as Midjourney and ChatGPT into creative processes, emphasizing the fusion of technology and practices and of traditional and art in education. Spencer Strike, PhD, is an associate professor of digital media design at Northwestern University of Qatar. His work centers on interaction design, mobile media, digital media and learning, video games, and entrepreneurship. Dr. Striker's current project is History Adventures World of Characters, a fully interactive digital learning series that presents a fresh approach to history education. His projects have received competitive fundings from the National Endowment of Humanities, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the National Science Foundation, amongst others. Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for that, Nour. So we're just going to jump in today talking about the role of generative AI in higher education. And I want to start with a thought from a recent Forbes article entitled, "How Generative AI Owns Higher Education. Now What?" And in this article, the author states that higher education needs a fast audit. The roles that professors and students should play in the education process must be redefined and then reinvented, if not reimagined altogether. So I'm going to direct the first question at you, Jamie. In your view, how should a higher education respond to this rapid tech upheaval?
Well, I like that. I like that pithy. I think it is. Okay, sorry. I like the pithy, quote that higher education needs a rapid audit. AI needs a rapid audit, and I think that's part of why we're all here. Dean Berbić mentioned a number of the potentials. We can see great potentials in AI, but then there's also challenges. And what we're facing right now is that the potentials are just that. They're potential. They're things we see in the future, by and large. Whereas the challenges, the obstacles that we're facing because of AI are very real. And if you just take a temporal snapshot of today, I'm very biased, I think we've got a very clear net negative. in terms of the impact of AI on student learning and what we're trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that we should step back and disengage. I think it's the opposite. I think that higher education has always been knowledge creators and knowledge brokers. And as we face both the challenge of AI, but also how does higher education need to pivot, that's our role. We need to be creating the knowledge around AI. We need to be brokering and distributing that knowledge. And so 2 things that I will say very briefly that I think we should be doing is, 1, we should be doubling down on excellence in teaching. That is broadly our role, and that's going to mean teaching with AI as well. We can get distracted, and it's really easy to have time and energy and funding. I had a pitch from Google last night on what they would like to do for us for a very high price tag. Right, so it's easy to get distracted there and to forget that far and away, the most effective piece of educational technology that's ever been invented is the whiteboard or the chalkboard. We need to double down on the things that we already know work with teaching. And then the second thing that we need to double down on, and I think this is part of what we're doing right here, and it came up in Dr. Samah's comments earlier, is we need to double down on having the conversations about what does it mean to be human. We're exhausted with the pace of technological change, and it isn't going to slow down. And the question is not, how do we bury our head in the sand or pretend like this isn't the world that we live in? The question is, how do we live in this world and live in it well? So doubling down on excellence in teaching and doubling down on the human conversation.
Thank you for that. And I think that's a great point, talking about how we need to pivot and focus on that excellence in teaching. But a lot of this conversation that we often hear regarding AI in higher education is looking at how education needs to respond to AI. And this is important. But I also want to flip that a little bit for this conversation. And so, Chadi, I would like to know from you, do you believe that there's a space for higher education to play a more active role in driving AI or creating AI rather than just being the recipients of it?
Absolutely. I think higher education, if you look at the mission of higher education, in my opinion, this has not changed for maybe the last 3 millennia. I mean, what is it that we do? Going back to fundamentals, we assist students, we empower them to build core competencies in a whole range of skills, including critical thinking, including adaptation, including interpersonal communication, including innovation. And the risk is that with Gen AI, with ill implementation of Gen AI, people will take the easy path and be able to fake it through assessment processes that we currently have to imitate as if they are achieving those skills. And I think there's a role to not just reimagine what higher education would be like, but really what society is going to be like in the future. What is the workplace going to be like in 20 or 30 years from now? Certainly when our graduates become industry leaders. And in my mind, this calls for some collaboration, and collaboration between government, even industry leaders, even tech leaders are calling for regulation for how AI should evolve with tech developers, with government, with industry leaders, and academia. Maybe academia could be the conduit to initiate that discussion about what it is that we want the future to look like, and then the role of education within it. And within that, the constants are, yes, we're still establishing or achieving the same ends in terms of core competencies, but the way in which we implement this in the curriculum could change and should change through things like personalized education and the like.
Okay, thank you. We'll pivot now and talk a little bit about policy, ethical implications and academic integrity. So in just the last year alone, the capabilities of generative AI have improved significantly. And as a result, it is influencing, if not changing, the way we learn, how we teach, and how we go about our daily lives, as I said earlier. Many educators are moving forward, experimenting with new designs, testing new pedagogies, and observing how students are using these tools. It is definitely an exciting time, but as we've all agreed and said earlier, not without its concerns. Some educators are concerned that Gen AI could potentially take over, quote, take over the learning that assignments are designed to impart, leading to major questions about the authenticity of student work. And other common concerns include academic integrity, ethical and responsible use, and accessibility as well. So, with that in mind, Sam, in what ways do you think, or does generative AI encourage and discourage learning?
Well, I mean, to give a slightly wishy-washy answer, it does both, and I think often at the same time. For my classes, I teach writing, both academic writing and creative writing. One thing I've seen a lot in terms of AI on students is that it encourages this focus on the product, the final bit of writing, the essay, the story, rather than the process, which is integral for the classroom. And it encourages students to focus on that product rather than think about, well, where did it come from? What are the sources for it? What research went into it? What was fed into this language learning model to create this product? Whereas it has to be us in the classroom, obviously, thinking about and talking about the process. And I think the way it might encourage more critical thinking is to make the process a more explicit part of learning. At the same time, in my field, and I'm sure in most of your fields, there's been a very recent drive towards decolonizing, towards decentering, to suddenly find with AI kind of one authoritative model that is very much not decentered, that students look up to as the definitive way of writing, really ignores a lot of ways of learning and a lot of diverse voices. Again, it comes back to us to integrate those into our classrooms. At the same time, I think it can encourage learning. What I've seen with some students in particular is a way of using it to drive that kind of bottom-up educational journey rather than relying on us as kind of benevolent spreaders of knowledge so that students can direct their own intellectual journey. But it takes curiosity, experimentation, innovation to be able to do that. And that's, again, where we come in trying to provide those, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Before I move on to Matthias, can I ask you a follow-up question, though? Given your response, has this led you to reconsider or rethink, reflect, or maybe all of the above, what's important to teach in your class? What is really important to teach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's buzzword, really, but it's the kind of critical thinking skills in terms of evaluation and analysis. There's no way of kind of judging if AI is doing a good job if you can't already have the evaluative skills to say what is good writing or what's problematic writing, what is bad writing. If you're just relying on the models created, then you're going to face problems. So I think, the key thing is teaching those skills to be able to then look at the writing and the models created by generative AI in order to be able to evaluate how they're helpful, how they're not helpful, what we might use them for.
Yeah, thank you. Matthias, can you tell us more about your thoughts regarding how generative AI encourages or discourages learning?
Thank you so much. Great question as well. As one of the historians on our panel, I would like to remind everybody, of course, that AI is not entirely new, that intelligent machines are not entirely new, and that the debate surrounding computers and the place of computers in education is not new either, but it goes back decades. And there are important concepts as well relating to computing, relating to cybernetics that are often at least half a century old. One of those concepts is the idea of the black box, that we have input and we have output, but then we have a black box where we can't see inside, where we can't see what's happening. And that's one of the issues with a lot of AI software, with proprietary software in general, that we know what prompt we put in, we know the outcome that is being generated, but we don't know exactly what the algorithm actually does and what information the algorithm uses as its basis. So in terms of limits, of course, there are limits to learning if we just rely on the machine to do something, but we don't really understand it. And one has to be indeed very skeptical and teach the students to be skeptical about what the algorithm indeed might be doing. And I'm glad that our students are indeed very, very critical. I teach Middle East history, and my students have asked ChatGPT, for instance, about the genocide in Palestine. And unsurprisingly, ChatGPT would start its account of, let's say, genocide in Palestine with saying Hamas is a terrorist organization. And sort of that would be ChatGPT's sort of view of, I guess, Palestinian resistance as well. And our students obviously have been very, very skeptical and rightly critical of what ChatGPT does. In terms of potential, however, I would also like to emphasize that AI is a powerful technology, and as such can be incredibly useful. Too. And what I would encourage all of our students to do is test the limits, just like with any other powerful tool. Test the limits of what the AI can do. Test the limits of what it can generate. Also regarding, for instance, decolonization and other edges of knowledge, and learning by testing the limits. Thank you.
Thank you. Chadi, I'd like to get your position on this same question, but I also want to go back to an earlier comment that you made because it is connected to something that I have in my notes that's relevant. So we know that in 2022, UNESCO issued a statement, if not a guiding document, about the importance of this kind of collaboration to address these bigger concerns around ethics and integrity. It's strongly encouraging institutions, makers of these tools, private enterprise, and government to work collaboratively going forward. Can you build on that comment and that statement that you made earlier in terms of how do we encourage and discourage collaborative activity going forward?
Indeed, and I think with every technology, there's a range of affordances in its usage. Some would be beneficial and some would be harmful. And the more transformative the technology is, the higher the risk of amplifying the positive and the negative. And I think specifically when it comes to intellectual work and what we call knowledge work, which we are supposedly skilling our students to do in the future, the risk is even higher. Think of any profession on which we depend on, and a professional rendering it in the future who does not really have the core skills to do it and has built a dependency on a system. Now, I think given how transformative the Gen AI technology is, and it's one of the many technologies that are coming and creating the fourth industrial revolution. You can add VR, AR to this, 3D printing, and the rest, cyber physical systems like autonomous cars, the higher the risk. And to deal with these risks, I think it's problematic to take a single perspective and blame everything on education, or indeed, as a previous article that Nicole has introduced, on the professor. So the professor now is a bastion of all the knowledge and they have the agency to do everything. No, I think we need a collaborative approach. I know industry is looking for guidelines for developing Gen AI in an ethical way. Matthias spoke about explainable AI. This is part of the regulation that many countries are trying to impose. Unfortunately, as we put things through machine learning, we don't know we have that black box problem. But industry is also a key stakeholder. They'd like to create new revenue streams, and I think having a personalized tutor for each student is a good way to create a revenue stream. Often when we're doing when we're doing the craft of teaching, we're broadcasting. We have very heterogeneous classes, students with very different aptitudes and capabilities. And if you can use technology to leverage their interests and skills to actually build those core competencies, that's a good thing. So it takes that collaboration between academia, industry, maybe with a governmental framework to all work together. Otherwise, I think the risks are amplified rather than the benefits.
Which is reiterating how your comment earlier, Jamie, is it not? So I'd like to shift to the next question. My next question will begin with Mary. Mary, how do you envision helping students become more informed and responsible users and creators of AI tools and technologies?
Well, I think the main focus for our teaching and helping them do that is to have them actually using it. Not in the case, well, I've done it a number of ways, but having them, for example, I teach writing, having them draft a piece for an assignment and then input that same assignment requirement into a particular Gen AI program and then use our time in class to analyze the differences and what is happening there. By that, then they are getting better understanding of what features of writing they are emphasizing, what features I may be looking for, and what ChatGPT or whatever Gen AI is using, what it seems to be emphasizing in terms of what is effective writing. I think doing those kinds of comparative analyses between what is output by Gen AI and what is output essentially by the students can be a good entryway to helping them understand how it can be a tool, but how it can also take over. The the assignments I've had students do those kind of analyses, the features of a text or a piece that they have always identified as most important to their own writing were their voice and also the way in which they developed their ideas. When they valued the ChatGPT, they always identified this kind of use of sources, grammar, mechanics, things like that. So one of the ways in which I think we need to be focused on incorporating Gen AI into our writing classes is to help students move beyond the kind of writing is correct grammar model and think in terms of writing as an intellectual activity, as a social activity, and something that is important to think about consciously. And I think that's one of the main things that I want to do with students in my class is have them consciously approach writing as Sam was pointing out, as a process, not as a product, that it is a process of thinking through and making particular kinds of choices. So I think in that way, I think we can use Gen AI in numerous different ways to help students foreground that conscious choice-making process.
And what makes that makes me think of how important it is to have that human connection, but also to have time and space in the curricula to do that, right? And in our roles in the library and the Writing Center, we regularly are bargaining for time in the classroom, negotiating for time in the classroom, because the curricula, the course schedule is so packed. So that makes me think of that. Spencer, would you like to add to this discussion?
Certainly. Thank you for organizing this very fascinating conversation, timely conversation. I really enjoyed hearing from my colleague. I have so many thoughts about AI but I need to sort of condense it into a quick couple-minute answer here. My particular focus and expertise is on the creative media component of it. So I teach a class at Northwestern Qatar called AI Tools for Digital Media Design. So my high-level thought here is that this is they're extremely powerful tools. This is a big phase shift in production methodology. A corollary could be when digital came online, let's say in the early 1990s, the mid 1990s, and then that sort of changed the game. There are also many other historical precedents for big tech shifts right now, including the internet, originally the personal computer in the 1970s. So back to what to teach students. To teach students to contextualize AI as being part of that legacy of technology innovation would be one component. And this fits in a larger kind of AI literacy kind of concept, that students to understand where AI fits into their workflow, as many of my colleagues have been talking about. This concept of AI as an accelerant of creativity, and a powerful tool, but not as a replacement, and where does it fit into the production workflow for a student. Also understanding how it will impact a lot of basic, well, in my field, creative media, the next, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years. There will be a lot of job displacement, I believe. It's already happening. There's going to be deep fakes, as you all know. There's a risk of content inflation. I think that talent is supposed to be rare, and it's not anymore, really. If you think about it, AI can crank out so much material, in particular high-quality art. If you think about Midjourney, that's really flipped the script on this idea of the rarity of high-quality content and the rarity of talent. On the flip side of that, though, is there's an incredible opportunity, powerful creativity accelerant, and a wonderful time for an autodidact, if you're self-learning and you can plug into learning communities. It's an amazing time for that. There's a democratization of tools, accessibility of tools that previously have not been available to people, and smaller teams can have bigger impact. So those are a few thoughts on how AI can impact education.
I think your comment about talent is supposed to be rare is rather provocative, and I would imagine if we were sitting here with students in the midst of this panel, it would be a really interesting conversation. Thank you for that. I love that. Considering your work, Rawan, in healthcare and working with pre-med students, what are your thoughts in terms of how do you envision helping students become more informed? Are there specific skills in your field? Are there specific competencies you'd like to talk about?
I think helping students become more informed users and creators of AI requires a comprehensive approach that includes multiple aspects that complement each other. I want to emphasize on the point that Dr. Spencer has already mentioned about building foundational literacy in generative AI. This means that we need to start incorporating generative AI fundamentals into the curriculum, and we need to start teaching students not only how to use these AI tools, but also how do these tools work, of course, at a high level. This is very important for the students if you are expecting them to be able to critically evaluate the outcomes of the generative AI tools. They first need to understand how do these tools work, what is the data training process of these tools, what kind of data is being used for the training, and understanding the types of data, then they can potentially be able to identify potential sources of biases, for example, what are the limitations of generative AI models, and so on. The second thought is about raising the awareness of the ethical use of these tools, especially for the students. We need to educate students about the societal impacts of using these tools. If we're talking about medical students in particular, then we have an increased level of caution that students need to consider. These are private patients' data. In addition, we have data that includes intellectual property. These shouldn't be uploaded or shared on those generative AI tools. Finally, I want to second Dr. Mary on the importance of providing the opportunity for hands-on experience for the students. It's not enough that we keep teaching them theory about generative AI. They need to actually experiment with these generative AI tools, fail, and learn in a controlled environment. These generative AI tools will eventually be there for them after they graduate. But then it's better that we train them in a risk-free environment, in a stress-free environment, controlled environment before they are ready for their jobs later on. So I think these all together should help supporting students for a more being more informed and responsible users and creators of the generative AI tools.
Great, thank you. I think we can agree that the use of generative AI in the classroom, in the laboratory, studio, and beyond has more benefits than drawbacks. Although maybe we disagree, Jamie, I don't know. I thought we were friends. So I'd like to turn our attention to focus on the possibilities and the many benefits that generative AI present. So my question starts with you, Jessie. As an artist and educator working intimately with first-year foundation students, can you give us an example of how you have leveraged generative AI in your teaching? I know earlier we heard some keywords, some terms, in terms of new ways of thinking, curiosity, sparking exploration. What are your thoughts?
For me, as I'm teaching drawing here at VCU, it's important that I'm engaging the students with Midjourney, which is an image generation software. And for me, it's a tool to expand the creative boundaries of what they're doing in the classroom. And so for me, I combine and even intertwine the use of Midjourney into my classes. So at times they'll make a completely traditional drawing, and then in Midjourney you can actually upload images for this prompt to feed off of, and even give image weighting to those images. And so I ask the students to build prompts and teach them the art of prompting, so that they can reverse engineer in some ways back from their original drawing, but moving forward into new possibilities to break through some of the creative blocks that they might have had otherwise. So whether in the beginning or in the middle or the end of the project, I find ways to fit the integration of AI into all parts of my projects in school here. So it can function as a co-creator for sure. So when you're engaged with Midjourney or even ChatGPT as an idea generation tool, there's a lot of things that you can do to enhance your design through iteration, and it can enhance, obviously, the art and design that you're working on. It can speed up the ideation process and significantly, create outputs that the students might have not otherwise thought about, which I think is super interesting, because the students that are heavily engaged in traditional digital or traditional analog media, when working with Midjourney, there's so many different outputs and so many different ways to reach the extremities of those outputs that the students are much more inspired than they would have been otherwise through a Google image search, for example. And so it's important to note for me that when they're generating these images, that that's not the end. I think for me that they don't passively accept those AI images as their own, and that they critically engage with those outputs and decide which elements to incorporate and which to eliminate. And so for me, the trained eye of the artist or designer and in the education that we give them here is still super important. But I think it's important as we move forward in preparing students for what probably is going to be an industry that is very AI integrated, that they're going to have to understand how to build into these AI tools into what they're doing in their future. So for me, I try to integrate it in as many different steps of the creative process as I can.
Thank you. Spencer, as an educator focused on digital media, amongst other things, can you also give us an example of how you've incorporated generative AI in the classroom? We've heard some really interesting phrases. You yourself, I think, said accelerator or accelerant, and Jessie just now said it can function as a co-creator, which I really appreciate. So can you tell us or give us an example of how you're incorporating Gen AI in your class?
Certainly. And Jessie and I have had some great conversations about this in the past. He's actually a guest guest spoken in my class as well. So again, the example I'll use is the class AI Tools for Digital Media Design that I developed at NUQ. I think that, again, it's an incredibly powerful accelerant of the creative process. And what I ultimately want students to understand is where AI tools are really effective and where they're not so great, and understand, the difference between the hype and the reality, and define that through practice, through experimentation and practice. For one, as Jesse mentioned, AI is amazing for ideation, for brainstorming, for concept art, for pre-visualization, for visual research, for coming up with characters, concepts, locations. Brilliant. As soon as you move into precision, which is what you need if you're doing an animated piece at a professional level or at a high level, or if you're doing a game, you need precision. And that's exactly where AI art and animation completely breaks down. So that's kind of the frontier of AI tools for digital media, and you want students to understand that. Another piece of that I want students to learn in my class is how to recursively get all of the sort of tools to work together as a methodology. So you use generative text for, as I mentioned, ideation, coming up with story, not for the final draft, but more like having like a egoless team of writers that keeps pitching you ideas and drafts. It's not the final draft, but it's very helpful in the creative process. Generative text for that. Generative image, which Midjourney is absolutely one of the most powerful and amazing tools I've ever played with. It's endlessly fascinating. Midjourney for generative art. There are also other tools, but I love Midjourney. Then you get into generative animation and video, which is actually, again, plugged in, because you can use the generative text to write the prompts. You can use Midjourney to create the art, and the art that you're happy with. Then you can use the generative animation to make that art come to life, defining let's say, the first and the final frame of the animated piece you're trying to do. So it's an integration. Then you use generative voice, 11 Labs, to basically bring, without casting any voice actors, you can bring it to life with voice. You can use Udio to create a completely original piece of music, custom designed to your piece. And you can even get sound effects from 11 Labs as well. So what I want students ultimately to understand is how to understand the cutting edge of what AI tools can do, and understand that complete production workflow and how they all integrate into one another. Yeah.
Thank you. So Dr. Gamar emphasized the importance of context and the possibilities, if not opportunities, that this context here in Education City, or just Qatar more broadly, offers us in terms of its usage, generative AI's usage in teaching and learning. Mary, can you share with us what your views are regarding the possibilities and benefits? And if I may, what are your thoughts in terms of our diverse learners, or those with different linguistic backgrounds or accessibility needs? If you could potentially speak to that.
I think one of the major potentialities of using at least Gen AI in writing classrooms is that, and I think it was Chadi that earlier said, as a tool for individual students. What I'm thinking of is, there are a range of literacies, a range of languages in any writing class at any of the EC institutions. And often, if we are focused on developing academic discourse, as we are at CMU, it can be a challenge to try and meet the needs of all those different students in the class. And so one of the things, I'm just playing with this right now, because as I mentioned earlier, I have been having students analyze what output ChatGPT does versus what they can do in their drafts, and I'm fine with them using it to quote unquote clean up their language, but only in the sense that they can then look at both versions and be able to analyze in what specific ways is this a better use of language than what they produced. In other words, I keep emphasizing to them that it's important that they know how this is working, that they understand why ChatGPT's version is more effective. And so coming back to that same process approach, so what I'm experimenting with this semester, and again, I'm doing this on the fly, don't know, I had a colleague last week just introduce me to Poe, as in Edgar Allan, and what she explained was that I can create bots, okay, that you can use Poe to create bots. And so what I started experimenting with was creating a coach bot for the students, okay? So I learned from the documents that she shared with me how to create a description for the bot to understand what I wanted to do. And so I did that, and then I input, as a test, I input some text that the student had already produced, and I was actually quite pleased with the kind of feedback, because that was the whole point, was feedback, not changing the student's draft, but providing feedback to the student about what they could improve. And so I thought, oh, wow, this is not so bad. I mean, I probably would have pointed out the same kinds of things, maybe with different language, but yeah. And so what I'm going to do is not hand that to the students. I'm going to form them into small groups and have them create their own bots. So they're going to go through the process of having to create the bot, giving it instructions on how to provide them with feedback. And the reason I'm doing it, having them do that, even though it'll take time, as you mentioned earlier, is that I want to, once again, foreground what they think about their writing, how they are imagining what they want to say, and how they can say it. So again, foregrounding the whole conscious process of what it means to compose something, whether it's digital text, images, language, or coding. It's composing, and we have to intellectually engage with that. And I want students to be doing that rather than just simply, okay, this is a bot that'll give me feedback. I want them to tell the bot what kind of feedback they need. And so I think in many ways that can actually get at those different linguistic capabilities. So each group of students will be identifying what they need from the bot for its feedback. So that's what I'm hoping to do with it.
That sounds really exciting, and I like that, particularly because for me it is also a way for us to conceive of generative AI as giving students agency in a way that we probably haven't thought of, which is quite powerful. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for all of these amazing examples. And of course, Mary, as a writing center person, this excites me. And also comes back to what you said earlier about the students coming to the realization that writing is an intellectual activity. This is a great way to integrate that. And the idea of AI as co-creator, as an ideation tool, I think these are fantastic ways we can be using AI in the classroom. But we need to shift now, because as with every new technology, all of these amazing opportunities also come with challenges. So Matthias, coming back to what you were talking about before, about your students should be testing the limits, but they need to be skeptical about thinking of the black box of the AI. What are some challenges that you've come across while incorporating AI into the classroom?
Thank you so much. That's another great question. If any of you have ever tried out generative AI, you will probably have found that a lot of the content that is produced by generative AI, whether visual or textual, is bland. It is boring often. It is inoffensive. It is not radical. It is sometimes the kind of corporate text that would be sort of palatable to a mainstream audience. It's the kind of text or the image that will not get you sued over. Even when you're trying to go into the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, it probably presents you with sort of corporate images of diversity, equity, and inclusion, not something radical and not something really innovative as well. I think one of the challenges is for us, if we truly want to create a better world, if we truly want to innovate and come up with new visions of how society could be organized, we need to have our students work with with AI and trying to make it more radical than it currently is. I also want to say something about language that you, Mary, mentioned, and also precision, what you, Spencer, mentioned. And here I want to make a call again for the humanities, right? That often it is the humanities that teach people precise wording and that teach us, for instance, how to precisely describe images, as we do, for instance, in art history. And sometimes having just a range of possible words, having whole, like a great repertoire of precise words that we can use, maybe gives us almost like an arsenal for more innovative prompts that we could design with hopefully more radical and better outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matthias. And bringing that up also brings together the idea of how interdisciplinary this needs to be in our thinking about AI. But Sam, I want to pose the same question to you. What are some challenges you've run into, but also, if you want to, take it a little bit further. Are there ways in which institutions can support educators a little more in overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for me, the big challenge in my classes is conceptual. And I think there needs to be a conceptual shift, and possibly I'll come back to that's something institutions can help with. But I had a student the other week say to me, well, why wouldn't I use, Bing or Copilot to write my essays? I use the calculator on my phone to do, any tricky sums I need to do. And I thought to myself, that's such a terrible analogy, because this is not a mathematical tool. It is a deeply fallible tool. And I think the conceptual shift in my classes is a big challenge for students. And I try and address that by discussing AI and what we can do with it in a way that is human, in a way that's intentional, in a way that's reflective. When I say it's human, I mean, I'm trying to encourage students to think of it as that maybe group member that you have in a group project. It may be a great co-creator, as Spencer pointed out. It may be a fantastic collaborator, but it may be someone whose writing and ideas are a bit bland. It may be someone who happens to have incredible biases. It may be someone who's racist. You're stuck working with them. And you have to think, what can they do well? Where do you have to pick up the slack? I think it has to be intentional, because students often rely on these tools without actually interrogating why they're doing so and what they're hoping to get out of it. And I think the key for me in classes is to make it reflective in the sense of building into any usage or any assignments where students are using it for any part of the process. Did it go well or not? What could have gone better? What did it do well? What did it absolutely fail at? And I think it's useful anyway to make students reflect about any process of learning, but I think it's vital here. And I think, as a kind of broad thing to say about institutions supporting us, I think it's great to have a space where we're encouraged as ourselves to kind of experiment with AI and be given the same kind of leeway that we probably should give students, by acknowledging that fallibility, that the things we try with it, the bots we create or the course content we create, may very well be a bad experiment, may go deeply wrong and may have, terrible outcomes. And to allow that failure, I think, is vital, rather than just assuming, okay, we're going to use AI and it's going to improve things or speed things up.
Fantastic. So we're getting close to the end of our time together. Before we open up the discussion and take your questions, I'd like to ask for your thoughts on the future. Rawan, what advice would you give to educators who are hesitant or unsure about incorporating AI?
So for educators who are still hesitant about incorporating generative AI, I would say start small, but keep an open mind. We understand that AI can be intimidating, but it does not necessarily have to be an all or nothing approach. The goal is not for you to become a generative AI expert overnight. That's not the aim. The aim is to be able to utilize to the best these generative AI tools for a more engaging, more inclusive, and effective learning environment for the students. Now, maybe more practical advices for the educators. I would say focus on how to use these tools to enhance the learning methodology rather than on replacing the current teaching approaches. AI tools need to always be thought of as complementary tools to support the current teaching methodologies rather than completely replacing it and rather than eliminating the human element in the learning process. The second advice would be to start with tools that you are already familiar with. And we have many of these tools that we use on a daily basis, but maybe we don't fully recognize that these are AI-driven tools. For example, student performance analysis tools, the AI-powered grammar checkers, and so on. So start small with these simple tools and easy tools to integrate into what you are already doing on a daily basis, and then gradually build your expertise in generative AI. The other point is that I would suggest that you do not feel hesitant to reach out to other faculty members who already have experience in incorporating some of these generative AI tools in previous courses. Gaps in digital literacy among faculty is normal, is expected, and it's completely acceptable. And we need to help each other bridging these gaps in digital literacy. So if there is other faculty members who have already tried to incorporate these tools into their courses, reach out to them and discuss with them what went well in these courses, what didn't go well. And this discussions should help significantly reducing your learning curve to incorporate these tools. So to conclude in all this, I think, in my personal opinion, I would emphasize that AI is not here to replace the educators. The human element remains important in the learning process. However, I would expect that educators who are able to embrace generative AI in their teaching will probably replace those who don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessie, if I could ask you for your closing comments, what's one thing that you would like the audience to do as a result of today's panel discussion?
Thank you. Yeah, the one thing I would ask everybody to do that's here today and go back and encourage your colleagues to do as a result of today's panel would be to do your research and start to understand how AI can be used as a tool to enhance but not replace your teaching and also the students' learning. I think those two things are really important to understand how it can enhance your teaching and also their students' learning. And whether you're teaching math, art, science, or general education, it has the potential to deepen the students' engagement and foster critical thinking and offer personalized learning experiences that they did not have 2 years ago. And as Dr. Rawan mentioned, I think it's also important to start small if you're sort of overwhelmed by everything that's happening. I think starting small is really important, learning manageable AI tools that can complement your teaching style, because maybe it's not the ones that we're mentioning today that might best complement your teaching style, but there's other ones out there as Poe or other ones that have been mentioned. And use them to push the boundaries of how students approach problem solving and creativity in whatever field that you're currently working in. Thank you.
Last but not least, Jamie, given your role as Associate Director for Pedagogy, what advice would you like to share, or what would you like to suggest fellow educators do?
So I know that I started off on a little bit of a downer point, but I love some of the comments that we've had here. And the reality is, I think we need to be candid about the challenges that we face. But if we were to go back in time 10 years and think about the kinds of experience, teaching things that we do 10 years ago, I really loved Sam's comment earlier, right? You've got a group project going on. And you create this assignment, you send the students off, they go working, and then you get the artifact back, and it's a little bit of Matthias's black box. Do you have any idea what happened when they were in the creating of that? And did they learn something because of how you designed your activity? Or did they learn something in spite of it? Or, you know, I'm a father of college students as well as a teacher of college students. Or sometimes, right, did they just get through it, right, with very little learning going on? And so no matter what kind of assignment or what we're doing in the classroom, we've got to think about that black box element. But as Dean Berbić brought up at the very beginning, this isn't a trend. It's not a blip. This is where we're at. So my recommendation to all of my colleagues, as well as just anyone, is you need to be reading, you need to be talking to other people, and you need to be experimenting. And that's very true when it comes to AI. We've heard some great ideas and suggestions of ways that people are incorporating AI in their teaching right now. But likewise, again, to build off of Matthias, you need to be reading and talking to other people and experimenting on what does it mean for you to be human and live a good life. And when we talk about co-intelligence and co-creation, and again, we've got fabulous models. I see the best ones in the arts, as we've heard about today, right? So, you know, you're creating your animated project, and right now, we know that precision, as we just heard, is a fantastic part where we come in as humans, right? Now, I'm not confident that 2 years from now when we have the panel, that's still going to be the answer, depending on where AI goes. I'm not confident at all about certain limits to AI, although I don't think anything's going to happen nearly as fast as Silicon Valley does. Regardless, you've got to read about, think about, and experiment with what does it mean for you to live a good life? What does it mean for us to live a good life together with our students? So that's my recommendation.
I would just very quickly extend those tasks to also include reflection, right? Years ago, Dr. Randy Bass said to me, Jacqulyn, there's nothing sexy about reflection in terms of a pedagogy. Go for it, push it, but don't expect great results in terms of getting faculty to collaborate with you on embedding reflection in your own teaching regarding information literacy, digital literacy, and now generative AI literacy. So it's sort of a quiet pedagogy that we maybe underestimate and maybe shouldn't. And we heard a lot of important points about reflection today as a powerful pedagogy. So with generative AI, reflection should be part of that to-do list, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Is this on? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so thank you. Yes. Thank you so much to all the panelists for this discussion. We covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of possibilities, and we hope that everybody is finding something to walk away with that they can incorporate into their own teaching, their own practice. But right now we want to open up the floor to audience questions. It's a great opportunity for you to ask anything you might want of our panelists. We also have some pre-submitted questions, so if you have a question, go ahead and pop your little hand up. And while our team is coming around to you with a microphone, I will be asking a pre-submitted question. So this question is from somebody just calling themselves M. And they would like to know, how might we measure AI's impact and effectiveness on learning, and what mechanisms could we introduce to judge its impact on education? Any takers from the panel?
All right, I'll jump in since nobody else is talking. This is again another question that's central to teaching and learning with AI or without. It's again that black box question, and all of us design assessments, and we think about it. The key thing, again, that higher education has been invested in, that we're all invested in, is thinking through evidence. So in my own classroom, whether I'm using AI or not, I have to think about what am I having them do that generates evidence that will let me know did they succeed or did they not. And we got to do the same thing with AI. We can't just say throw AI at them and then ask them, how did it go? We've got to be thinking in terms of evidence. Are we designing assessments or activities that do raise artifacts that we can then look at, that we can measure? And likewise, as Jacqulyn very competently brought out, we need to reflect on. And are we seeing that reflection? So are we designing activities where that reflection can be seen?
Any last, yeah?
Just to add to Jamie's comment, I think for me, it's about the level of independence versus dependence that students can perform tasks with. Definitely, Gen AI could be an amplifier, but do they still have the skills? Have they developed the core skills for which we want to assess them? Or are they simply developed dependence on a tool that they can't do without? And I think this is the litmus test for me as to whether we're assessing in the right way and educating in the right way.
Did we have an audience question? Yes. Yeah. Yes.
My name is Nour. I'm a professor at Virginia University Information System Program, and thank you so much for the very useful talk on AI. So I just want to share something that I believe in Gen AI until last month. Until last month in August, when I was invited as a guest speaker in one of the biggest tech exhibition, like a conference in Asia, and when I was invited as speaker, who was a co-speaker, is actually a humanoid. Humanoid is a human with robot. It's like more an advanced version than Gen AI. Gen AI, we were talking about Gen AI, it's an app, right? We don't see it. But when I first saw humanoids, it's real. And it's actually a keynote speaker. One of the highlight keynote speaker is just make people forget about me as a human speaker. So people are focusing on humanoid as a human speaker.
Oh, no, we hear you. I think we're all a little shocked and sad. I'm sorry that this happened to you.
Who joined me as a lead, perhaps a speaker in that conference. So it made me went back to my class and said, guys, I'm sorry. When I told you that in the future, robot will replace, the way human work, I'm sorry. This is not in the future. It was happening yesterday. So my question to all of you is, how could we teach our kids in the next generations to be better than robots? Thank you.
Maybe, yeah, thank you so much. That's a great comment. I'm interested not just in the history of science, but also in the history of science fiction, in which, of course, robots have existed for a long time. And since at least the 1970s, we have even novels written about entire universities where everybody is a robot. The president of the university is, of course, a robot. That's very easy, to give those kinds of speeches. But of course, all the students are robots too, and all the faculty members are robots too. Can robot offer everything a human teacher can? Not, of course not, because in the end, a good teacher is also supposed to be a mentor about not just the things that have to do with academia, but also a mentor in terms of life, right? Maybe in the best sense of the word, maybe a good teacher can also be a friend. And I think we would have to wait for a long time until a robot can be a true friend, like a human friend. And one maybe last quick comment about robots replacing all of us. Like I was talking to people earlier here as well about the tech industry, and it doesn't seem as if the people who work in the tech industry work any less. It's not that if you get a job at a tech company, you have to work only 2 hours per day, and sort of all the other work is automated. On the contrary, often if you work in a tech company, you often work until 11 p.m. at night, on the weekends, all the time. And this is what the CEO of tech companies might call ownership. You have product ownership, which means you work all the time.
I was just going to quickly say that from my point of view, with writing, it's the things that the robots, the AI can't do that are more exciting. The reason it's so often bland, this writing, is because there's not years of experience behind it. It's not lived, it's not embodied, and the best kind of poems, stories, or art, or things we tell about ourselves, things that make us human, rely on those experiences, both positive and traumatic, and rely on the kind of embodied ways we interact with the world. And I think it's difficult for me to conceptualize of robots ever, or AI ever, fully replicating that without experience, without bodies and embodiment behind it.
Yeah, on a related note, not so much about robots, but robots are fascinating, but more about automation of tasks. If you were to apply this to, let's say, the game industry, and disruption that is inevitable in the game industry is happening now and will definitely continue to happen. Concept artists, if you're a professional concept artist, this is very threatening. The Midjourney is incredibly directly threatening to you. So and many other roles, including programming. So one thought is, if you're mediocre or bad, you've been kind of like eliminated. Like, so that's pretty rough. But you have to be excellent now to compete with how good these models are. That's one thought. Another thought is that the emphasis will now be on art direction and creative direction, back to the point that Sam made and others have made, which is the discretion, the human in the machine, knowing what is, most of creative direction actually is saying no. Is saying no to 99 ideas to find the one idea that's really good, and that's very, very hard to teach. And that's why creative directors and art directors are usually in charge, why they get paid well and so on. The emphasis will be on that. So back to the idea about the robots, I mean, the displacement. In other words, we'll be able to automate and have basically artificial intelligences and generative art models that can basically do many of the sort of essential tasks, the mid-level tasks, and that's going to be going to have a lot of impact. It's going to put a lot of pressure on people in the industry.
I'd just like to add one thing, and this is both what Spencer was talking about, but also Sam and Matthias earlier mentioned, the ability to provoke, and I think that's crucial. Robots aren't, well, maybe in the future they could be built to do exactly that, but right now they are built to simply give us what we are telling them we want. So that is what makes things bland. I think the whole point is they're bland because they don't have any context. They are missing that, as Sam pointed out, the embodiedness, the rich intersection of space and time that makes creativity really hit us, provoke us, challenge us. And that is what we are looking for. And I think at this point, that is what distinguishes us as humans, is that ability to reach out to each other in ways that will wake us up.
Thank you. Thank you for that fantastic question. I think I see Rob with a...
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Jacqulyn, and our distinguished panelists. I'm Rawan AlSaad. I teach in the liberal arts and sciences here at VCU. It's great to have you here. This is an amazing, obviously extremely timely discussion. I have a bigger question on my mind from the beginning, from the opening remarks. Amir Berbić beautifully said this was not, generated by ChatGPT, and so did Dr. Gamar. And that spoke to me about that idea of authenticity in the learning process. I've done something radical this semester. No screens, no phones, no laptops in my classes. Radical. Why am I doing that? Facts are cheap. We can find them anywhere, everywhere. Some of them aren't even true. Many of them, alternate facts, right? So what am I trying to get at with my students? I want that authenticity. I want the real person. I don't want that humanoid. And not because there's anything wrong with the AI at all. In fact, all of the points that you made are fantastic. And I've done this in previous semesters where I'd have them basically brainstorm using ChatGPT and then get them to critique the ChatGPT and say, students, as among other, it's not the only platform, but among others, is that students are looking for shortcuts. And then I have to ask myself, well, why are you looking for shortcuts? And we did a little survey over the weekend. This is fresh stuff, hot off the press from last night's class. How many hours are you spending on social media, on your screens? What are you doing? And they looked at this past week. 3 to 4 hours a day on entertainment. TikTok, Netflix, Shahid, whatever. It's like, okay, that sounds like that's probably a lot of time where you could actually be thinking about what you might write for a course, for example. And so it begs the question, and my biggest concern in all of this is how we fetishize the more. Faster is better. Quicker is better. More is better. And we're forgetting that maybe less is more. Less is better. And I sure as, hope to God that we'll figure that out before we burn out this planet. If I were to ask, and I could survey my students about this, if I could ask the number of students, how many of you have a new iPhone within the past, 6 months? Hands are fitting. Why? Right? Why do we have to have the latest, newest, quickest? What is this? Now, I have my, my corporate antennae up about why that's happening. So I don't want to sit here and give you a long rant. I've already done that. But what I do want to do is ask the panel, anybody who wants to tackle this, how are you within education tackling this whole dynamic that we have in contemporary society, where we're pushing for more and more and more? And certainly, I feel like my students are often victims of that. And that's where the learning process is no longer a learning process. It's all task and product oriented, and it's not about that reflection. Who has time for that? And students are feeling so burnt out that they want to veg out and just watch sitcoms and other things, and games, just to pass the time, because it's just, they feel there's all that pressure. And I know, speaking to colleagues, there's a suggestion here, that a lot of us are feeling that way too. So I'd be very interested in your thoughts on how do we combat the bigger elephant in the room, which is the push for more, better, quicker, faster.
That's a beautiful comment, and we are definitely also part to blame as faculty, as administrators, how in the universities too, right? Professors often feel the pressure. We need to publish more papers, get more citations, get a bigger H index, get more research funding, and more. And it's often quantity rather than quality. So often, unfortunately, we feel pressure to publish more papers rather than fewer papers that are better. And maybe we should sort of reflect ourselves and try to pass on to our students that maybe it's quality is better than quantity, that a reflection is better than output, and that one authentic piece of writing that is maybe provocative is better than 5 pieces of writing that are bland and unoriginal.
If I may add here, I think you raised a very, very important point. And I think one major reason of this is the issues with our current assessment methods for the students. We got this hype of technology, but the current assessment methods are way behind than what do we currently have in terms of technology. So we're pushing the students for more projects, more assignments, more exams. And as you mentioned, it's not always the more we have is the better. And at the same time, even as a faculty, when we plan for a course, you have the SLOs, the student learning outcomes, and we're matching this into the number of assignments, number of projects, and so on. We need to focus on the main skills that we want our students to learn. We want to focus on fostering more creative thinking, push our students for higher order thinking rather than pure plain submissions, which students nowadays are also finding their own ways of submitting some authentic pieces. I came across cases where students, they first go to ChatGPT, generate whatever they want. And then there are currently tools which you give it as an input, ChatGPT output, and then it will try to humanize the language of that text and make it look more authentic. And then students go submit this tool. So they go not only through one step, ChatGPT, but now we have extra burden for the students. And at the end of the day, they're just trying to find their own ways for shortcuts to meet the assessment methods that we as faculty put for them. We need to immediately, I think, and urgently revise our assessment methods. And then this should hopefully reflect on the way students approach their assessments and their exams.
Could I just respectfully disagree that I don't think it has anything to do with assessment methods or necessarily the way we teach? I think for me, the difference, you know, we had satellite TV when I was a kid, but I didn't feel the need to spend 3 or 4 hours on it. I think the elephant in the room is nothing to do with education or assessments. It's the world we're living in, the things we don't talk about. As you alluded to there, the fact that our planet is burning up and dying, and our students are facing a radically impoverished and threatened future. I think the fact we're living amid genocide and terrible things we're exposed to all the time, I think the level of anxiety that creates is for me much more of a driving force than any kind of educational metric. I don't know what we do about that. I wish I did, beyond actually mentioning it and pretending and not pretending we live in a bubble where all of those things are kind of irrelevant, because they're not. And I think the kind of apathy that is driven, or the escapism or the anxiety about the kind of world they're going to graduate in, and the jobs and the social situation and everything going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, but I think we have to acknowledge that at least, even if I don't know how to solve it, I'm afraid.
My son mentioned to me the other day that, Dad, why do we have to learn so much? It's so annoying. ChatGPT knows it all already. And because he shares my account, I'm seeing all the things he's searching at school all day. And I'm like, does your teacher know you're using ChatGPT? Well, no, but everybody is. And I think that's the same case for us in university. You don't be naive and think not everyone's using it. Everyone's using it. And you mentioned the iPhone, because that's the first thing I thought of when you were speaking initially. Anyone who watched the Apple keynote last night? Yep. All these people who will watch it are going to have iPhones within the next 1 month. Because ChatGPT is now Siri, and AI is integrated throughout the entire phone in every single way possible, from even taking a photo and recognizing what it is and pulling up all the links to a restaurant to whatever it is. So with the new iPhones, everyone's lives are going to become simpler. And not that lazy is the word, but everyone's going to be more challenged to look for information or to try to research anything. And so with the new iPhone 16 in all of our students' pockets, and over the next couple of years, I think we're going to be facing a lot more of what we are facing with our own children, perhaps, of why do we need to learn? And it goes back to kind of my integration of AI into my teaching. I think AI has to be used to inspire. And I think it's our job to maybe figure out how we can do that, because everyone will be using it. And for graphic designers or game designers or concept designers who are now having to, as Dr. Spencer said, be great because the average no longer works when AI can generate these images that are beautiful so easily within seconds, that we're going to have students that are inspired to be better than AI and also use it in a way that they hadn't previously thought of. So it's a very difficult task, but I think our students are going to be changing very rapidly in the next couple of years because of that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, your amazing questions have stolen the show. And we are already over time, and I know we have to be very respectful of everybody's time, so we have to say goodbye. I'm sorry. But we do want to say thank you again to our panelists for this amazing discussion. Thank you to you, our audience, for your great questions and engagement. We really hope that this conversation today has sparked some ideas for you. I want to take a quick moment again to thank Dean Amir Berbić and for Dr. Gamar for our opening comments, and a big thank you to Dr. Amy Andres for her continuing support of us. And please stay connected with us for future events. Thank you for being here, and have a great day.